ready. We'll give it a couple more minutes. There's still people joining, and I'm putting them in a wait room so I could admit them as they come in. So we'll give it a couple more minutes. In the meantime, does anyone want to start off just kind of doing a wrist check? Share what you wear.
Well, here, I'll go. I'm right next to you. So I'm at the Rolex factory here. So I'm wearing my Rolex. So I'm wearing my Explorer. There you go.
Nice.
They needed some help. They had to shut down for a couple weeks. So, you know.
You're holding down the fort, huh?
Yeah, you know.
I'm wearing my IWC today. The chronograph.
2000 base truck.
Holy cow. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, we sent the email out to about 50 people, so we're up to 30 already. So we'll see how many we make.
A few more trickling in yet. I'm wearing a Kermit. Got this watch from my beautiful wife in 2007.
That's a nice one.
I'll jump on real quick. My name is Peter, and I kind of like the Breitlings, so I've got a B1 as well as the Colt. So for some reason, I needed 2 Breitlings.
That's a good start.
Yeah, I like that thought. 2 wrists. There you go.
There you go.
I'm wearing my Cartier Ballon Bleu today.
I'm actually wearing, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. I'm actually wearing a watch that David, he sold me. This was David, gosh, I can't think of it. It was about a year ago. This is a Audemars Piguet day date, circa 1985. I happened to walk into the store one day and just happened to find it. David was kind enough to show it to me, and it had to send to be sent in for servicing, but it's been a great watch for me to wear for most days here while I work, so it's been good. How you guys been?
Good. You?
Doing well, thank you.
Hey,
Watch
David.
is beautiful.
How you doing, Ryan?
Good. Hey, are you still available to ship and stuff? You just can't be open for foot traffic?
Yeah. So we've kind of put a few little things in place, and we're hoping that fulfillment will begin next week, a couple days a week. So.
Okay, I saw one that I like, so I'm kicking it around.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna have a couple team members go access the vault every couple of days, and we won't have guests in the store while the stay-at-home order is in place, but we will be shipping and arranging deliveries. So we are happy to help however we can.
So it reduces the drool factor in the store.
That's right.
Hey guys, my name is Brandon. I've got 6-digit Explorer 2 style. It's my daily beater, wear it just about everywhere.
The beater? That's a nice beater.
Well, I say it's farmer proof because it doesn't have a moving bezel, and it shows that it gets used, and that's like it.
That's good.
I apologize. Where's everybody?
I get me and Co. Roll time.
Hey, David.
All right, we're up to 32 people in the room. I'm going to keep an eye on the waiting room, but David and I are going to go ahead and get into it.
One sec, Nick.
All right, sounds good. Can I get a thumbs up if you guys can see my screen okay? Awesome, perfect. So today, David and I wanted to talk about a couple of our unexpected favorites, one that you might not expect that we'd choose in the era of everyone going after vintage chronographs and vintage Rolex professionals and things like that. But we each picked out a couple of things that we like quite a bit. We wanted to share them with you, and then we'll open up the floor for you all to tell us what you like too. So with that, we have this brilliant watch in our pre-owned case right now. It's this H. Mosier. And, you know, I have to admit, I wasn't extremely familiar with the company until we got our first Mosier in the pre-owned case a while ago. It's a relatively small company. It's actually based in Schaffhausen, Switzerland, same place as IWC. And this watch in particular is just absolutely gorgeous. It has this black lacquered dial, gold case. When you feel it in your hand, you can really feel the weight and the quality. We have a couple more joining the group. There we go. They're in. But yeah, very clean lines, very understated. I tend to like watches that are a little bit flying under the radar. I like wearing watches for myself, and ones that fly under the radar tend to be some of my favorites. I just really like the balance of this watch, the leaf hands. And say, just as a quick aside, if you don't mind just hitting the mute button, that would be appreciated, just to reduce some of the background noise. That'd be great. Thank you. Here's a little bit more about Mosier, the company. Are you guys getting the audio or no?
No, I'm not hearing it.
Okay.
The audio just comes through your microphone, not the sharing.
All right, we're gonna
Actually,
fix that.
Nick, right when you go to share, just hit the bottom two buttons that say share volume.
We got it.
We only produce 1,000 watches is the fact that we pretty much do everything in the watch. You know, we're a small team of about 50 people, and it takes 25 to 70 hours to assemble one of those watches. We believe in kind of individual, humanized products. We believe that behind a product there should be one person. We want to stay true to what exclusivity, luxury is, and it's about rarity. The chances that you'll ever meet somebody wearing the same watch, the chance is close to zero.
All our movements are made in-house, including things like the gold screws that you find on the escapement wheel. We're very proud about that because that's what ensures the quality of what you do. All our watches are unique in their own way. And the perpetual calendar is probably the most ingenious. On the 28th of February, or the 29th, if it's a leap year, there is an instant jump to the 1st of March. What I love about our products is preparing the movements, building the movement. And then there's this amazing transition where you bring the module, you put it inside the movement, and just by bringing a small screw and starting turning it, the hairspring and the balance wheel start rotating. Suddenly, the entire movement comes to life. At H. Mosier, we produce watches that are ingenious and very rare. So if you want the same watch as everybody else, an H. Mosier may not be for you.
A very rare brand. They make about 1,000 pieces a year, again in Schaffhausen. Very understated. This is one of their big, beautiful movements that happens to be in that H. Mosier endeavor that we have. And the really cool thing about Mosier is they make almost every component of the watch movement themselves, which is very rare, especially even now, as more watch companies have kind of been pushed into making their own movements. A lot of companies are designing, they're not necessarily making the components in-house, but Mosier really makes almost every component in-house, including the hairspring, which is just like crazy that such a small company would be able to do that. So just one of my favorites at the moment.
It's very, very cool. It's the third iteration of Moser, too. I know that originally it was 1858, Heinrich Moser, and then he went by Henry Moser. And then in 1918, the company got swallowed up by the government with the whole Red Uprising in Russia. So if you see those old pocket watches, those are the true H. Mosers and C's. And now it's just a trademark owned by Moser Schaffhausen AG. But beautiful, beautiful pieces. Back in the day, czars and imperial Russian courts wore Mosers. So they're very, very, very cool.
A lot of history in that brand for being a more modern iteration of a historic name. It does have a lot of special history involved. And actually it's now owned by, it's still considered like an independent brand. It's owned by the former CEO of Audemars Piguet. And his family now runs the company. And so it's a good watch company by good watch people. Still.
2002, they were brought back, and then 2012 they were sold, and that year is where they came up with the Heritage series. So it's really, really cool that they'd go back to the hand galoshing and the hand making of all the parts. Very cool.
Cool. Thanks, Ben.
I shared my Moser with David, so my eyes went up when you showed me this.
So my unexpected favorite is something I really hadn't had a lot of time with until we recently took one in to sell. It's the Yachtmaster 42. It's very understated for what it is. A lot of it, people would assume a steel watch on a rubber strap, just kind of under the radar. But I actually think Rolex finally got it right. You know, they did a 42 millimeter that's not overblown like an Explorer 2. They did the rubber strap that has the titanium reinforcements running through it to give it a little bit more shape and a little rigidity and endurance. The Cerachrome bezel isn't shiny and glossy. It's actually a matte black, which is, to me, more of a tool watch look. And the maxi dial, very easy to read with some great, what do they call their lume? I'm blanking. Chromolite. Luminova. So very comfortable on the wrist. As you see, I wear it really well with the beads. And I modeled for that. That took about 7 takes though, so I'm not really good at modeling, but that's fine. So, and we happen to have one available to sell. Here's just a little data on the piece, so you can definitely see what they do. And, you know, the -2 +2 is really intriguing to me as well, so that they really tighten that timekeeping and live up to what a Rolex should run like. So enjoy it very much. And here's a quick glimpse if you wanted to see it before it goes online. Can I do that? There you go. It is available now though, if anyone wants to call me or send me an email. We can get it out.
What's the price?
$29.5.
So David, you said you have 2 and you kept 1 and one's for sale. I didn't quite track that.
No, this is the first one. This is the one we took in to sell. So one's for sale. I don't think they'd let me keep one. That's probably
Their video on. Damn it.
bad form.
No.
I got a question. I think it's such a beautiful watch. When I look at that bezel, though, I can't help thinking like the grease that's on your fingers from your face. Once it gets into that recessed part, that it would just be like you can't wipe it because of the recessed part of it. Have you gotten any sense for like you have to just take soap and water to it a lot, or how do you maintain matte black finish with?
No, it actually looks pretty resilient that way. I've kind of been, you know, tooling around with the bezel a little bit, and I haven't seen the fingerprint stay. My wife just made some chocolate chip cookies, so I'll give it the ultimate test a little bit later and let you know.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Guys that have like matte black cars, all they talk about is how hard it is to live with. So that was my question, but thank you.
I don't see any on there, but.
Chad, maybe this matte black watch would be good for Marty's matte black car.
I was gonna say we have a matte black truck and had a matte black BMW before that, and we've actually found it easier to keep clean. So I'm surprised to hear that anyone thought differently, but we just see the dust kind of rolls off of it, if you will, instead of like sticking to the shiny surface.
Okay.
Different in watches, I'm sure.
What's the water resistance on that one?
100 meters.
Cool. Neat piece. All right, here's something completely different. So pocket watches don't get much attention nowadays because you can't wear them. And I'll admit they're not particularly practical, but God, they're so cool to collect. And there are so many really amazing pocket watches out there, even that were made in somewhat modern times. But yeah, I get it. They're not wearable. In my earlier days, I tended to look for pocket watches just because I really like the history and everything. And although I don't wear them, I've kept some over the course of time that spoke to me and that I liked, and have picked up a couple more here and there. This one I wanted to share because it's one of my favorites in that it's a little bit unusual. First of all, it was made in Sweden. And when we think of watches, we don't necessarily think of Sweden. Watches made at this time, old fusee pocket watches, were primarily made in England. And you would see the maker's mark, and they would say on what street they were in Liverpool or where have you, wherever it might have been. But this particular watch, this pocket watch here on the left, was made by a gentleman, Jacob Koch, who was born in the 1730s and made watches right up until just about his death in 1805. And so he was active at a very interesting time in American history, certainly. And his listed profession, when you look back in the watch books and things like that, was watchmaker to the King of Sweden. And so he made watches and clocks for nobility and people on the royal court, a high-grade watch and clock maker, to say the least. And over the course of his life, he made about 2,000 timepieces. And so his shop turned out maybe about 60 pieces a year for the 35 or so years that he was active. And so, as is the case with a lot of these antique, unique pocket watches, there weren't a ton of them made, especially the ones that were being made by independent watchmakers in small shops. So just kind of cool. This one, I took an exposed picture of the case so you could see how the case is formed. So if you can imagine opening the cover with the crystal, the movement is actually attached to a hinge in the case, and then it hinges up to reveal the case back, and that's where the maker's mark and hallmark and the year that it was made are all stamped. Very common style of case at the time. Cases back then were made in gold or silver or some type of alloy. And on some of the silver cases that had gaskets, the gaskets were actually made of lead. This particular watch was made in 1789, and that happens to be the year that George Washington became our first president. So if you think about that time in history, I mean, imagine powdered wigs and long coats and, giant skirts and royal balls, and almost something out of like Pride and Prejudice, which I think was maybe set in the early 1800s, but you get the idea of what life might have been like back at that time for someone who would have owned this particular watch. And then just the last picture on this one, I show the balance assembly and the balance cock here. All of the work on this particular movement was done by hand. So the screws that you see were turned by hand. The engraving is by hand. The hairspring was drawn by hand. The polishing, everything was done one at a time. And then on the right, you might not expect to see it on a pocket watch from the 1700s, but these are actually diamonds set in the hands of this watch. And so some blacksmith created the iron for the hands, And Jacob Koch himself would have cut them out, shaped the hands, and then set these very crudely faceted diamonds in the hands at that time. Just unbelievable. Really, really cool. And watches like this are out there, and they're less valuable than you might expect them to be for, I don't know, how interesting they are. So this is another one of my favorites.
Nick, have you been to Stockholm before?
Nope.
I was this past August, I was in a wedding. My college roommate who lives in Sweden or just outside of Stockholm, we were there. I can't tell you. The Swedes are kind of by nature very quiet people. They're very reserved. They're not flashy. They're not going to talk about their crazy watch collections and things like that. But I can't tell you what the city of Stockholm is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been to. And the number of like awesome watch shops in that town is unreal. Independent places. There's lots of good, authentic dealers as well. If anyone's interested in a town that's fun, go to Stockholm and you'll be shocked on how much of a watch city that is.
That's cool. Thanks, Mark. Anyone here a pocket watch collector by chance?
I've got a few of them.
I used to in the early 2000s, and then a lot of it just became out of style.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish they were more wearable. It just seems like there's so many interesting things and deals to be had and stories to tell, but
Yeah.
the practicality just isn't there for me either.
I just picked up, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I just picked up on Craigslist for $20. This guy, a friend of his, I believe it was also his roommate, fought in World War II in Germany, old man. And he had picked up this pocket watch in a German store, and he wore it, the entire time he fought. And when he passed away, a lot of his belongings went to this friend, and the friend didn't know what to do with this. But it's a little timer. I don't know if you can see. It's a stopwatch, but it's from Beauvais, which nowadays, makes those insane, $700,000 perpetual calendar type things. But this is when they were making pocket watches, for the army. And it's crazy. I paid $20 for it, and it's just like, I don't know. It's really cool to find these old things, and he has all the documentation and everything, and it's just a cool watch with a lot of history.
Nice find, Enzo. $20.
Yeah, I know.
It's awesome.
Nick, I think if anybody can bring back the pocket watch and the chain and the vest pocket, you could.
Yeah.
Right along with the man brooch.
I might have to give it a whirl. We'll see.
I think so.
All right. Thanks for your vote of confidence, Peter.
So my next favorite happens to be a Panerai, and of the mind of go big or go home. The Carbotech really kind of intrigues me a little bit. The one thing I found unique when we were looking at this is another recent acquisition for the store to sell, so we have it in stock as well. But because of the way the layers work on the carbon, they're layer by layer added to each other and held together by a very high density polymer. But the way they're layered together and then cut out into the cases and into the crown guard and the bezel, every single Carbotech is going to be slightly different than the next. So every one has its own little fingerprint, let's say. And you can kind of look from the side, and when you look from the side, you see the kind of carbon fiber profile that we always think of. But everywhere else, it kind of takes on this unique striping and unique array of different patterns and views and things like that. The Luminova, as you saw in the previous shot, is just bright and beautiful. They also put in their 3-day movement, so you can just wear it and not worry about it and let it run its course. And then the slight little accent of that kind of neon blue. That's why I chose the shirt that I did tonight. I kind of tied it into the watch because I'm wearing it for the night. Just kind of showing it off. It's 47 millimeters, so it won't fit everybody, but You can pull it off. You can definitely wear it and enjoy it. But I chose to wear it tonight to be part of the PowerPoint tonight too.
Does it almost look similar to like makame wedding bands, or kind of that?
Yeah,
pattern?
a little bit. Yep, it's got that unique little kind of layering, and it's based on how they do the layering, it kind of gives shadows rather than a uniform texture.
Really cool.
So with that, those are just a couple of our favorites. And what about you? We want to hear from you guys. What type of favorites, especially unexpected favorites, might you have?
I can go. I really, I should say this, my taste has definitely changed, and I've really been enjoying the 70s era timepieces. 70s divers and sport watches. So I got a couple examples I'll share with the group. This is from in the late 60s. Fortis made one of their more popular watches called the Flipper, which was their version of a dive watch, and they re-released it from 73 to 76. I've got an example from somebody who lived in Australia and bought it there in the mid 70s. So a little bit of wear on the bezel, but past that, it is just absolutely great condition. So I think it's kind of cool. I really like divers. I like the 70s colors and looks.
Is that case painted that color, or is it plastic? It looks like the whole case is orange.
Yeah, it's actually like a plastic. It's like a molded plastic, and it's also a manual movement, which it kind of makes it a little cooler too, in my opinion. And then from the late 70s, I have a EPOS diving watch, and the insignia that's in there is the United Arab Emirates Air Force. So I've got a military watch from the late 70s, and just the story beyond this is so cool. 1970, United Arab Emirates decided to get the 7 families together and break off from British rule. Became a country in 72. In 73, they stood up their Air Force. And they were trained by the Pakistani Air Force, which were trained by Americans. And in the late 70s, this watch was flying around basically faster than the speed of sound during the oil embargo. So it's just a really cool piece, very original. What's also nice too is because it's a pilot's watch, it has a triple release to make sure this doesn't go flying off when you're flying with it. So those are my 2 unexpected shares. Not as cool as the Rolex from the pilot that we heard about last time we met in person, but I still think it's pretty cool.
Thanks, Ben.
Say for me, it's the Yachtmaster 2 in the duotone. 44 millimeter, I usually go for anything under 40. So pretty much on paper, it's the worst watch for me on the planet, but I love it.
Well, I don't have this watch, but this one I've been looking for is an old Smith military watch. To me, they're just clean. They're simple. They got a lot of history to them. And I did actually find one on Watch You Seek a while back, but they're still commanding, good thousands of dollars, depending on how the condition is. But it's a really, to me, a nice clean watch anyway.
can jump in. Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
This will be a share and a question. But I was in New York last year at the Watch Time event in New York City, and I didn't know about this character, but I was wearing my Frederic Constant watch, and I found out that he used to work there, and he started a watch company called Demonico, I believe, and showed me some of those watches, and I thought that was some of the coolest stuff I've seen in a while from kind of an independent. And he showed me this watch that was kind of a limited watch that was sold to match this new supercar that they were releasing. And it was like carbon fiber with, these pressured metals that they were using. But I didn't think that I would see the watch again. And this, goes for David or Nick, but I was on the JB site and it looked like somebody, had sold one back to you guys, or a used one was sitting there, and it was, kind of just in my head. I wonder who that was, or why did he have that watch? I think the only place I saw that was the watch was being sold at retail was, some shop in Maryland, but otherwise, at the show was the only time I saw the watch, and I thought it was really cool. So if you guys can speak on that, that'd be pretty awesome.
So a few years back, we did a trunk show with Demonico. I think you're talking about Pim is his name.
Yeah.
So he was the head watchmaker at Frederic Constant. He got bored essentially, and he went to the owners. It was a privately owned company at the time. And he said, you know what, I think we can do so much more. I'd really like to get involved in, some development. And the owner said, well, what are you thinking? And he said, well, I'd like to make a tourbillon. And he said, go ahead, but what are we going to do with it afterwards? He goes, well, we can't sell it under the Frederic Constant, name, but we can go ahead and we'll call it something else. We'll figure that out once you do it. So it took him about 4 or 5 years to develop the piece, and they decided that it went well enough that they were going to continue and start making more of those types of watches. So when we did the trunk show, we probably sold 6 or 7 watches at that trunk show. And the one that's in our pre-owned case is a steel with a sapphire dial, so you can see the movement from both sides. And that one was sold that night, and that gentleman traded it back in and went towards something else. But yeah, we do have one of those in the case. And everything at the time they were doing was limited to multiples of 8. So no more than 88, but they had some that were 28, some that were just 8, and a couple singles. So, but kind of a fun idea. And we still see him when we go to the shows. We still talk to Pim and visit with him about how things are going. And it's a very intriguing story.
And David, correct me if I'm wrong. I think at that time, this was a couple of years ago, but I think at that time they were talking about releasing 100 total watches per year. So somewhere in the range of 100 piece a year production.
Yep, very small production, very, very. So.
Other favorites?
Or we can branch out and talk about whatever.
Well, it's definitely a ways up for me in terms of price point, but the 5524 Tech, it's the Calatrava Pilot Travel Time, the white gold one with like a blue dial. It's like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, except for my wife, if she can hear me right now. Seriously, that's like a goal for maybe 10 years out or something. I've seen one in person. It was on a lady next to me on an airplane, and I didn't have the guts to ask her about it because I usually figure people that wear Patek don't. Yeah, they usually don't want to talk about stuff like that. But yeah, something about the numerals, everything, it just works. Of course, it's Patek too, so that certainly doesn't hurt its case. But yeah, very, very nice.
I agree, man. I agree.
Am I the only one curious what like David probably has that Indiana Jones warehouse behind him with just like endless watches? I mean, just just grabbing random
I
things.
brought a couple to do some videos on. I just have a couple to just so happen it's the one he talked about. So
David's at an undisclosed location with that is heavily armed.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's turrets. That's all I'm gonna say.
David, what's the story? I didn't know we had that one. What's the story on that?
So this one was part of that same an estate that we had come through. We bought like 4 watches from it, and it was originally purchased in late December of 2018. And I ordered the regular strap for it, but it hasn't come in, so I had to put it on something. So I chose one of the Gabaro straps and put it on that. So white gold, blackish blue dial, so complete with box and papers. So
Do you want to let us know the what's the damage on that one?
let me look it up real quick. It's a good question.
And then you got to show it closer to the camera again.
Okay.
You could throw it on a NATO strap if it would save me a little money.
What was that? 5524. What was the reference on that one?
Yep, 5524G.
I'm glad you brought that up. Hey, David, what are you seeing for demand for like the Pateks, like beyond steel now, the kind of pseudo dress watch, but it's not really dressy. You can casual it down. Is there much? What's the trend for that right now?
Say that again.
So, the steel watches is what seems to be in the highest demand. So how about something like that Patek where it's a dress watch brand, but you can casual it down. So what kind of demand is for a watch like that? Because I love that watch too.
Yeah, I think the demand on these kind of sportier looking Pateks has always been strong. It's interesting to me that they're committed to not producing more of them based on demand for them. That's curious to me. And price on this one is going to be, well, we'll do a Thursday Watch Talk special at about $33.5. I'll hold it closer for everyone to see again.
Oh yeah, that's a beaut.
That one comes with 2 different case backs, doesn't it? I think which one do they have on there now?
This is the sapphire crystal case back.
Okay. But it's come with a solid gold one. If I'm not, maybe that's all Pateks. I don't know, but I know that one for sure. I thought came with.
I think they did a limited edition one that had the 2 case backs. I don't know if this particular one does.
Oh, okay.
I'd have to double check when we're allowed back in the store.
All right, I'll jump in with one. The watch itself isn't all that interesting, but it's, I guess, where I got it that's kind of unique. I'll hold it up to the camera. Hopefully it shows. It's a 1969 Breitling Datora. I happen to be in downtown Monrovia, Liberia, of all places. And I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but it's about as third world as it gets. I was there probably 6 or 7 years ago, so they weren't long out of their civil war. And a friend of mine knew that I liked watches, specifically mechanical watches. And she told me to go up to this little watch booth. It was about the size of a phone booth, literally. It was about that big, just enough for a guy to sit at a chair and have a bench in front of him. He had all these watches all over the place, and it was basically doing batteries all day long is what he was doing. And I asked him, they speak English here, and I asked him if he had any mechanical watches, and he pulled down this, I don't know, junky Kenneth Cole with some Chinese something in it. Nothing wrong with the Chinese booze, I guess, but it's not what I was looking for. I said, no, I'm looking for something a little bit more special than that. And he pulled up his little drop cloth that was catching, batteries and parts and stuff. And he pulled the head of just this out. I had just the head of it. And I saw it coming at me. It was like everything started going in slow motion. And I saw it coming at me, and I'm like, this thing's legit. The second it hit my hand, I realized this is a legitimate watch. I looked at it. I knew it was vintage. A Breitling, obviously a name that I recognized, and it was a chronograph with a date on it, and it was in relatively good shape. And the first thing that came to mind was, where did this thing come from? Just because they were in a civil war, I wondered if someone lost their arm over it, if some dictator wore it, or I don't, who knows where this thing actually came from. But I said, well, what do you want for it? And he said, $50 US. And all I happened to have on me was $40 US. So that's what I offered him. I said, I'll give you $40 US. And he jumped on it just like that. And I just, knowing a little bit about Liberia, that was probably a month to a month and a half salary for the guy, that $40 US. So he was a pretty happy camper. I took it back home, had a watchmaker friend of mine kind of go over it, look through it, said I look pretty clean. And I don't wear it all that often. I should. It keeps great time, but it's one watch that I'll never get rid of. Paid $40 for a Breitling Datora chronograph, 1969. So the location, though, I think is the more unusual part than the watch itself.
Cool, great story.
That's awesome.
John, what were you doing in Liberia?
I had gone over there with an organization to train their National Liberian Fire Service on firefighting type stuff. And I was there specifically to train them on driving and pumping their new fire engine. They bought a fire engine in Wisconsin, of all places, put it in an overseas container and shipped it over on a boat. And we pulled it out of this container when I got it over there, and had to teach them how to drive it through their streets, which was very tricky, and how to pump on the thing. So it was all firefighter related stuff.
Very cool.
So Nick, I can share my Swatch collections.
Yeah.
So I've liked watches for a very long time, but these were probably the most quote expensive watches I bought early on. So a friend of mine who lives in Switzerland got me this one, which is very, very Swiss. Might be hard to see, but like Swiss cows and Swiss cheese and all kinds of Swiss related things. Box and papers. 2000, I think this was 2007. And then I have a nice one. This one's from 1999. This was a sports watch. Nice chronograph, Swatch sports watch.
Very nice.
This one's my favorite. So this one, it's kind of hard to see this, but it has a movement where if you tap on it, it's a love meter. So if you hit it, it spins around and it says things like, it's called French Lover. And it says like kind of a like Wheel of Fortune thing. So it'll say, it says something like, do I like you? Not at all. Love you. Finally.
So does that make it a mechanical watch or a quartz?
I think, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
It's a hybrid.
That's right.
Hybrid, yeah.
My tastes have gone up a little bit since then, as David knows. But they're fun. They're super fun.
They are fun. Has Mark ever tapped it?
No, he stays away from it.
Actually, when we got these out like 6 months ago, I was reading about this and I could not get it to work because, of course, we're thinking about touchscreen and it's
no, you gotta whack it.
tap, but it's not fancy capacitive sensors. I had to read about it, and it has a accelerometer. You got to whack it, and when you whack it, then it moves. That's after I put a new battery in.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you, Dave. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not.
We can.
Oh, okay. these watch Thursdays, I really want to get up there, but being where I'm at and being I've usually got to be up for 4:30 in the morning for work. Is this something that maybe you'd consider at some point, maybe doing these online as well for those of us who are out of the area?
We are definitely moving in that direction. Actually, I need to get a quick disclaimer with just somebody giving a thumbs up. We actually have recorded this presentation and hoping to use this as kind of our springboard to see how it works in other avenues. So if you could all just give me a quick thumbs up to tell me what we can use this reproduction, that would be great. There's our legalese. But in the future, we're going to do Facebook Live and, maybe other ways to connect to the ones that are in the store as well. You and Brandon and Clint. I don't know if Clint's on here tonight yet, but you guys have all expressed interest in being able to see a few more of these, just not able to make it down. So we're definitely going to go that direction. We have all the equipment now, and hopefully that'll come to fruition in the near future. So.
One more question for you on watch sizes too, being that you're the watch experts. I keep reading back and forth, it vacillates. People say 42 millimeter watches are just a fad right now. Others say, no, they're here to stay. What are your thoughts on the bigger sizes? A 36 always going to be classic. I mean, I assume it is going to be, but.
I think so. I think, so even, let's use this example. Even Panerai, last year took their, normal stance, 40, 42, 44, 47. That was their normal, right? And they've even gone now and started making 38s, which in Panerai world is unheard of. Why would you ever make a 38? That's a small watch, but it's gaining popularity. So I do see that it's kind of coming back to a norm of, more in that 38 to 40 range, with the others being outliers. But I don't see 36 being a problem as long as it fits within your personal preference.
Yeah, I agree. I sometimes shudder a little bit when working with a friend or a client, and they hold the watch in their hand, and before they even try it on, they say, well, what millimeter size is this? And I just I'm of the opinion that it just matters what matters is how it feels on your wrist. I know personally I wear watches from 33 to 46 on a pretty regular basis. I mean, Mark, you shared that AP with us earlier. That's probably a 34, 35 maybe?
That is correct, yeah. Lug to lug, or basically case size, is 34 millimeters.
That's like an exceptionally awesome, really, really cool watch.
I love it. In fact, you're not wrong in that. I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'2", and I think for the most part, I mean, right now I was just flipped over to here. I still have my no date sub 2, and that's 40 millimeters. To me, 40 millimeters is as big as I want to wear. So I'm purchasing one that was 34 millimeters. I was a little nervous, but quite honestly, I mean, if I'm, at an event or in clinic or whatever, and this thing, it fits perfectly with a suit. I think someone had mentioned too, 36 millimeters, I think, is the sweet spot that people talk about for a dress watch. I can't think of wearing something even bigger than a 34. I love the size of this watch.
And then, so I guess we have clients at all levels of the range. Watch companies, I think, are still making larger sizes. If you look at Tag Heuer with their Carrera watches, they've gone a little bit larger recently. Hublot is still making big pieces. Panerai obviously always will. IWC, the big Pilot, is a big cornerstone of their collection. With the recent reintroduction of the Pilot and the Portuguese that they just redesigned, they didn't reduce case sizes at all. Lee, you're on the call. I know you like larger watches. Ryan, what's the sweet spot for you? You said maybe 42, but what do you think?
No, I'm a 36 on mine, but I look at some of these subs and stuff. I got a buddy of mine when I was in law enforcement. We love watches, but he worked out. He's got a 42 wrist, and to me, when I tried on a 42, that just looked like I was, compensating.
Oh.
And and I wouldn't say my concern is, but you get some of these watches that I like the subs and stuff, but unfortunately they're in a little bigger style. you know, you kind of wonder, is it all going to come full circle? Is it a fad? You know, and I've had other people ask me that question too, and I'd like to hear it right from the experts versus reading it, you know, on different opinions.
Nick, you're right too. It's amazing how quickly your eyes can adjust to what's normal on your wrist. When I was wearing the Panarites, the 44, 45s, that seemed normal, and then I'd put on a 40 or even smaller, and it looked just tiny. It's you can adjust pretty quickly, I think, to what looks normal when you look down.
Yeah, just try something for a couple of days. You know, almost force yourself to wear something for a couple of days, and you'll be able to adjust to anything. It's just a matter of, is it comfortable? Do you like the way it feels and looks, and what it does for you? But yeah, I'd say go outside your comfort zone on either side of the coin, and why not?
I'm not one of the experts here, but I think it's really cool when men and women have a variety of sizes. Car analogy or comparing it to that again, but it's fun to get in a small sports car, and it's fun to get in a big truck with huge tires. Like I like the variety when it comes to watches, fashion, cars, anything. I think it's cool to have the small and the big.
I will say I used to deal with a lot older vintage, and anytime I wore a 30 millimeter, everyone asked me if it's a woman's watch. So I do think that there is too small for men's watches, and for a long time they made 30 a standard, and then 32s were there, but 34 for, and I'm a bigger guy too, but I've got pretty small wrists. I think 34 is probably the smallest I would consider.
I was wondering, I'm new to the group as far as meeting with you guys, but I've bought several watches from Nick and David, and I was going to show you my must have been about 10 or maybe 15 years ago now. My wife and I took a trip to Switzerland, and my wife wasn't really into watches, but she let me go and look at all the cases and stuff, which was a lot of fun. And she decided that she wanted to go to a watch place. So we went to, in Geneva, we went to the Swatch store, and she bought this watch there. And she's no longer with me, but this watch has sentimental value to me. And it's, they told us at the time that this watch wasn't exported out of Switzerland, so that Switzerland was the only place you could buy it with the Swiss flag on it and stuff. So that's my interesting little watch that is obscure. And then recently I bought this Blue Side of the Moon Omega from you guys, and I really like that.
Great watch.
And then I had a question for you guys. I know a few years ago you handled Gerard Perregaux, and I was wondering, and I've had several of their watches, and I was wondering what the reason was that you guys dropped them.
David, I think that was a couple years before your time, right?
It was, yeah.
Okay. So I think that was 2011 that we moved away from GP. At that time, we had a few brands in that same vein that are all exceptional brands. Can't say enough good about them, really. Breguet, Glashütte Original, and Gerard Perregaux we represented. And it kind of just got to the point, to be honest with you, where I think everyone in the state of Minnesota that wanted one had it. And there just wasn't enough residual interest in those particular brands. And so things just kind of ebb and flow. Obviously, they're the staple brands that you'll want to have forever. But Gerard Perregaux is a really cool brand.
Well, yeah, I noticed that you guys have quite a few of them actually right now, don't you? You're not quite a few, but you've got several.
We do.
And
yeah.
Two of them that are super collectible, if you've still got those two.
Yeah, GP started in the 1700s. They've been independently owned ever since they started. They only have ever made mechanical movements. They do just about everything in-house, and including really, really complicated pieces. So you mentioned the couple that we have in the pre-owned case. We have a perpetual calendar tourbillon. We have a regular perpetual calendar. And then we have a chronograph with a 1/8 of a second Boudreon mechanism, some really funky stuff. And in the time that we carried them, they even had this one, I forget what it was called now, but it was a watch with a mechanical mechanism that would run like it's not called a roulette, like a slot machine. So Kathleen, you remember this, don't you? Yeah, it was a really cool piece.
We got to pull the tab, and I got 3 cherries. So I
Did
won.
you really?
So I said, "Do I get to keep the watch?" And they laughed at me. I think it sold for what, 750,000?
Something like that.
Yeah. It was sold to a dealer from Las Vegas.
Yeah, really cool brand. We stopped representing them just because there wasn't enough local interest, I think, in the brand at that time. But you never know. They might be in our future, or some of these other ones too.
Well, I'm sure that sometimes, like you say, if your market dwindles and stuff, then it's hard to, just to justify it. Like, and so I was just curious about that, because I've heard rumors. I've heard rumors. Other people say that their quality had been dropping. Had you guys ever run into any of that, or?
We didn't experience quality issues that I remember. I don't recall that being an issue or a reason for that. And just remember that at that time, post 2008, 2009 financial crisis, a lot of things were changing, and that's when a lot of brands just kind of exited the U.S. altogether for lack of interest. So think about brands that were very, very prominent ahead of that time. Maurice Lacroix comes to mind, for example, Ebel, things that you saw a lot more of that after the crisis, you just didn't see as much of. So I guess that was one in the upper echelon of things too, that kind of went by the wayside, or we heard less from.
Well, I just have to say thanks. It was really cool to see those 2 collector ones in the case there, and to be able to touch them.
Yeah.
So that was fun. Thank you.
Do you think we see a brand shift now with the current crisis? Have you seen anything start yet?
Nothing really yet. I do believe that towards the end of the year, because of everybody, like the shutdown's not only affecting like here, but it's worldwide. So I do see some, lags in production for some of the different brands that, you might not expect, bigger brands that get a lot of their supplies from either, like a lot of the, how do I want to say it? Because, the value has to be 60% Swiss in order to be called a Swiss watch. Some of the companies on the lower end do use China for some of their cases and bracelets and things like that. So I think we're going to see a little lag there with product supply. So I don't think you're going to see like a price surge on newness, but I do think that some of the availability will be a little delayed.
I was on a call with Cartier 2 days ago, I think, and they informed me that they've opened all of their boutiques in China, which was a good positive sign, I guess. Obviously, we don't know where this is all going to go, but yeah, like David intimated, there will certainly be supply issues, and different markets are going to be open or closed over the course of the year. But I guess I'm a little bit surprised to this point that I haven't seen a fluctuation in the market value of a lot of these things, which I think is good. We're hopeful to continue to buy watches in any market, I guess you could say. But selfishly, I've been looking for smoking deals out there, and I haven't found any yet. So,
no.
Nick, are you talking about new watches coming from factories or secondhand watches? Some of the higher priced. We think of the Pepsi Jubilee, Rolex now, and even the Batman on Jubilees come down about $1,000, I think, secondhand. And so I think we're seeing a little bit of a correction, but are you seeing that mainly from factory, or do you also think it's going to hold true for the secondhand market?
I guess I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I haven't seen much fluctuation yet on the secondary market. I've seen some of the same things you have in terms of what the asking prices are. Asking prices seem to have come down a bit. some of the Rolex models. And actually on Rolex, there seems to be a theory out there that that dealers will suddenly have more of a supply of these things, because as people aren't able to go into stores and demand maybe has diminished for a short period of time, it hasn't necessarily stopped the production or the shipment of these watches, maybe potentially. So you could see a scenario in a few months where we reemerge from this and suddenly dealers have, 2 or 3 pieces in the vault that they would have been waiting 6 months for before. But
what do you think about brands like IWC? I think, it's a much more approachable price point for a lot of individuals, and it's one of my favorite brands that I'd like to get into a little bit more. And when you think about it, it's the Spitfire chronographs, and we're not talking just about big pilots, but some of those watches, there's a lot of bang for your buck in this really, really great brand. Do you see a brand like that try to maybe place themselves in the market a little bit better, trying to get people more invested in the brand as people kind of the economy start to wake back up again and people start again shopping?
I don't necessarily see them doing more like price changes and things like that. I do see, like stores like us and other vendors for them doing a little bit more advertising with it to try to drive a little bit more traffic their way. With what, like you've said, with what they've done and doing the Spitfire Chrono or the Spitfire Mark 18, as well as the Portuguese Auto, putting all of their own movements in these pieces. The price difference between those and the old modified ETA versions are $300 difference, or $400 difference when you're talking about the Spitfire Chrono. So to get a full in-house movement for just that little bit of a premium, to me, speaks volumes for what their intention is to stay solid in the marketplace. We were able to see a little bit of a sneak peek earlier in the year before all this started happening. And they're going to do, they have their Portuguese 7-day automatic. They're going to do something that bridges the gap between the Portuguese Chrono and the Portuguese 7-day. That's just a straight up Portuguese automatic, that the price is more similar to the Chrono than it is to the automatic. So there's a lot of exciting things that, if all goes well and it comes to fruition the way they think it is, I think it's going to be good to see coming forward.
Cool, thank you.
Is it also true that some of these manufacturers are not going to be putting out 2020 models this year and they're going to hold back?
Yep, the big, so Rolex and Patek both have said that. Tudor has said that. So Basel was postponed to January 21, and all of those companies have stated now publicly. Before it was rumors, but I think there was a Hodinkee article yesterday or today that stated that that was the case, that they are not going to release new product this year. So sorry, Rolex guys, you're going to get bored for a little while. Come by an IWC.
Does that mean they're just going to continue to make the current models that they were even probably planning on discontinuing?
So Rolex to me always is like 2 years ahead of themselves. So I think that there's going to be even more of a drought. So it's been my contention through this that there's going to be a small little dip at the beginning because everybody's wanting the coronavirus price. And so some people are going to come down just to try to satisfy that and sell the product that they have. But I think eventually it's going to start going back up a little quicker than normal, because they're going to realize that Rolex isn't going to be supplying their dealers with, a sub or a no date sub or a regular black dial GMT, black bezel, black dial, because they're going to change those models. The template has been laid with the Batman and with the Pepsi, with the smaller lugs and the, lower profile bezel and things like that. So I think they're going to go that route. And then everything else is going to be, kind of just patiently waiting for something to come into a store. So I think you'll see a little push on the secondary market for some of those pieces. And vintage will stay strong because it's always strong for them. So.
Do you guys still have that Ulysses Sonata?
We do.
That's a really cool watch too. I really
Beautiful chime, yeah.
It's really it's kind of out of my price range, but I keep looking at it and anyway. But it's a very interesting watch.
Well, we'll talk about that, Nick.
Okay. See how many I bring in with me, huh?
There you go.
Cool. Well, we really appreciate everyone signing on. Obviously, it's a little different from what we're used to doing First Thursdays in person, but I think this digital format's working pretty well, and it's just really a pleasure to see and chat with all of you from our own little isolated corners of the world. So I really appreciate you guys all signing on and taking the time to unwind with us, so to speak. It's a lot of fun connecting, and I think David and I have agreed that we're going to try to do this on a at least weekly basis. And some of our other team members are looking into talking about jewelry and things like that too. If you're looking for another outlet or things during the week to do, keep an eye on your email. And of course, David and I, had come up with an agenda for the rest of the year for the in-person presentations. But now that that's been put on hold, we'd love to hear from you if you have any ideas or topics that you want to learn more about on a weekly basis through these virtual meetings. So you can use the chat function now if you want, or you can just reach out to us privately, whatever you'd like to do. But we would love to be responsive to whatever ideas you might have too.
I really like the sentimental stories that came up, hey, they may not be the most expensive watch out there, but you know what? Hey, this watch belonged to my dad, or, in the case of, hey, I was in Liberia and got this one. That would be just an interesting little, everyone's got a story, 2 minutes. This is why I have it.
Good idea, Ryan.
Thanks, you guys. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. It's kind of fun for us to have this distraction as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick and David.
Yep. Stay home, stay healthy, everyone.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
See y'all next week.
Great. Do it again. Thanks.
Thank you.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Okay.